This podcast is recorded on stolen and unceded Aboriginal land.
We acknowledge the First Nations and elders of this country, and we join their calls for justice.
What was the intention when Bill Shorten was like...
The last government gave us robo-dead. The last government gave us robo-victims. The last government gave us robo-denial. Today, Labor will give the victims some robo-justice.
Clearly, it was a line that he spent. It was old school Bill Shorten. Remember, like when he was the leader.
Yeah,
when he was the leader of the Labor Party, and he always had these zingers that Sean McAuliffe would make fun of him. Well, clearly, you've spent a lot of time on this, and he said that the Royal Commission that the Labor government is going to announce, it has announced, which is a good thing, is going to deliver robo justice.
But I don't understand. You're standing up there to be like, okay, this incredibly tragic, awful, evil thing happened and people died and like robo-justice, like also here's a funny pun on like the word that was used for this program. Is it meant to be funny?
I guess it's well. Look, I mean, you know, he knows enough about politics that it's gotten a lot of coverage, and it's clearly the quote that everybody's using. But the impression that it gives is that they're going to dish out justice using the same system that they use to do like robo-debt. Like it's going to be an automated system.
I didn't even fucking think about that part of it. I was just like imagine, I don't know. Yeah, you get up and you announce like. If they got up and when they were announcing the, commission to Aboriginal deaths in custody and were like, and here's a funny pun about deaths and jailing and racism. And that's what we're committed to as a government. Like, what?
Yeah.
These people.
Robo-justice, activate justice.
Activate.
End suffering.
Exterminate poverty. Just kidding. We will not raise the rate.
The last government gave us robo-debt. The last government gave us robo-victims. The last government gave us robo-denial. Today, Labor will give the victims some robo-justice.
If you want the goal for life, free marijuana, vote Greens.
These people, these Greens, they are snake oil salesmen.
They're a bunch of ratbags and a bunch of idiots, and I've got no time for them whatsoever.
Frankly, I've always found the Greens to be a real serious danger to Australia.
A serious danger to Australia.
Hey, speaking of the Greens, this is a podcast about them. It's a podcast about Greens politics in Australia. I'm Tom Ballard. This is my dear comrade, Emerald Moon. Hello, Emerald.
Hi, Tom Ballard.
Disclaimer, not an official Greens Party podcast. It is made possible with the help of the Green Institute and produced by Michael the Griffin. We are going to be joined by our returning Cooker correspondent, Tom Tanuki, from the YouTube. He knows what all the crazy right-wingers are doing, and we're going to talk to him about the latest as well as rental rights.
We are.
Big shout out to our new patrons. Go to patreon.com/seriousdangerau. Thank you to Lee, Ace, Abigail, Dominic, Lauren, Kelly, Sam, White Room, Green Room, Not Fussed.
I don't understand that one.
Keep the funny patron names going, everyone. We love them. Christopher Zane, Declan, Julie, and Emily. Thank you so much. For as little as $3 a month, you can help us keep the lights on here at Serious Danger. It helps us pay our producer, Michael the Griffin. It helps us cover all the costs of hosting this everywhere and getting it out into the world. We really appreciate your support if you can do it. Patreon.com/seriousdangerau. Oh, and I want to give a quick shout out to Jonathan Parry, who is the National Secretary of the party.
Yeah.
There was a by-election in the Northern Territory. I don't know anything about the Northern Territory Greens, to be honest. There are no Greens MPs in the State Upper Territory Parliament, but there are obviously awesome people out there, doing the Lord's work, representing the Greens. A by-election, Michael Gunner, the former Territory leader, stepped down. By-election in his seat in the Fanny Bay by-election. Jonathan Parry was the Greens candidate, right? He was the only candidate to live in the electorate. And he managed to get a 9% swing to the Greens to bring us to 19% in Fanny Bay.
That's huge.
Isn't that huge?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Well done, Jonathan. Hello to all the comrades in the Northern Territory. We should find out more and get someone from NT Greens.
Majority Greens government in the NT when? Soon? Who can say?
It's coming.
I represent the rent is too damn high party. People are working 8 hours a day and 40 hours a week to some a third job. Women can't afford to take care of their children, feed their children breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Can't afford
Mr.
to pay the
Cuomo,
rent.
30
Stop.
seconds for you, sir.
Rent is too damn high.
Emerald, the rent is too damn high. Would you agree?
I would agree. I would very much agree. If only there was some way to do something about this.
Do you have a good landlord or no? I know that Max Chandler-Mather, who we'll talk to in a moment, has issued all these breach notices against his landlord over the years. What's your situation?
Oh yeah, I don't have that kind of landlord. Like they're pretty much fine, but they're landlords, so no, they're not good because that's an oxymoron.
Guillotine. ASAP. We have seen the biggest rent increases in 14 years. Over the past year, rents have increased by more than 13% nationwide, by almost 18% in capital cities. That is 7 times faster than wages. That is triple the rate of inflation. About a third of the population in Australia are renters. We've got 2.7 million people living in rental stress, about 1 million, more than 1 million, in fact, living in severe rental stress. Very, very bad. And I think what's also particularly spicy about the current situation, like rents are going up in regional Australia too, all over the place. In Bundaberg, in Bundaberg, rents have increased by 22%. In Toowoomba, in Queensland, they've gone up by 15%. Emerald, do you know who happens to have an investment property in Toowoomba?
Lots of people. Who is it?
Person I'm thinking of particularly is the new Minister for Housing and Homelessness, the Honourable Julie Collins, MP. She has 2 residential properties and an investment property in beautiful Toowoomba.
Okay.
Well, one in Canberra, one in Tasmania, where she's from.
It's essential.
Okay.
Absolutely. All right.
Yeah. And then an old investment property in Toowoomba. At the moment, of course, landlords are kings. They can do whatever the fuck they want in terms of jacking up the rent, and they can evict tenants at the end of their lease on no grounds just because they want to. They want you to not be in their house anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I just think, imagine finding out that your landlord is the Federal Minister for Housing and Homelessness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Be part of the solution, honey.
That's right. Providing housing. Like that fucking, I mean, God, it's the Albo landlord story.
Seems that way. On Thursday, the Greens spokesperson for housing and homelessness, Max Chandler-Mather, did a media blitz. He was fucking everywhere, announcing the Greens' proposal to do something about this situation. We are calling for a 2-year rent freeze, calling on the federal government to coordinate an emergency nationwide rent freeze.
Is it cold in here? Because I sense a rent freeze coming on.
He should have used that line. Did you give him that line? That's good.
I should have, yeah. Yeah, that's why he needs to hire me.
So talking about getting National Cabinet to agree on national tenancy laws that freeze rents at their current level for the next 2 years. So whatever the rent is right now, it's this for the next 24 months. After that, institute an ongoing rent cap at 2% every 2 years. So rents can only increase by 2% every 2 years and end no grounds evictions and secure basic tenants' rights. This, it should be said, is like a modest proposal, as Max was saying, that like even if you cap rent increases at 2% every 2 years, wages aren't going to catch up until 2029.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So this is like a sensible centrist, sold out, moderate position. Is that right?
Yeah, it's frankly disappointing. Despite what's his face on the project being like, this sounds vaguely like socialism or even communism, Max. What say you?
Discuss.
Yeah.
And of course, Max was pointing out that this has been done all over the place. Victoria froze rents for 6 months during the pandemic. There's been rent freezes in British Columbia and certain areas in Scotland, and there are already rent controls in New York and New Jersey. I assume that we'd love to see this, Emerald. This is really good policy shit, yeah?
Oh, obviously. I mean, it's essential. I think it's fucking insane, obviously, that we don't have rent caps in place as an ongoing measure and that landlords can just increase the rent literally however much they want to. And it's a constant source of intense stress and fear and anxiety for most tenants, thinking that, at any point, the landlord could just decide to raise your rent so much that you can no longer live in the place. And in combination, it is important to point out that it works together with ending no grounds evictions, because there are some states that have said they'll end no grounds evictions. So a landlord just can't just kick you out at the end of your lease for no reason. But without rent caps, they could just increase the rent enough that it's effectively a de facto no grounds eviction because they know you can't afford to stay there anyway.
Jesus. And I love all the, and people say, oh, there are good landlords who like froze rents during the pandemic or they stopped doing that as if they deserve a little cookie or credit for not kicking people out during a pandemic. Yeah. And even when there are good landlords, again, it all demonstrates the power imbalance. It is entirely up to them and to their whim. And if you don't have one of those good landlords, then you're fucked as far as the law's concerned.
Yeah, and it will often, again, like prevent people from requesting repairs that are absolutely necessary or for asking, the landlord to do something about dangerous mold in their home, for example, or repairs that they need to have a safe, secure home because they don't want to be issued with a no grounds eviction or have their rent increase so much that, the landlord wants to get rid of them and so they just raise the rent that much.
Is it grounds to evict someone if they just like complain about mold? Could you just sort of say
it's not grounds to?
This tenant to me is like too obsessed with like mold and not wanting to die, and so I want them to leave.
So a lot of I'm not sure if all, but most tenancy laws I think have retaliatory evictions provisions that say that technically you can't evict a tenant just for being annoying or for raising something, asserting their rights under the laws. But everyone who's ever rented or, been a landlord, I'm sure, knows that that's exactly the way it works. If you're a difficult tenant, your landlord is going to want to just get rid of you, and they absolutely have free reign under our current laws to do so.
What do you make of this political strategy? Because I don't want to be Debbie Downer or whatever, but and as this bear out by the government's reaction to this, the the Albanese government is going to say, yes, we're absolutely going to do this. Thanks for the suggestion, Greens. But Max was everywhere. It's a big announcement, big policy announcement, putting it out there. Is this kind of the political strategy that Greens constantly come out here with great ideas and put it on the political establishment, particularly the government, to explain why, to get them being asked the question constantly as to why we can't do this? Why don't you think this is a good idea?
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that the government has had to respond at all is incredible because the Greens have been campaigning on renters' rights for years and years. And I remember having conversations within the party, maybe even just a couple of years ago, about trying to continue to push for rental reforms, but feeling as though there just wasn't enough, there wasn't media interest, obviously, to start, but there wasn't even really interest from renters and from the public, and the zeitgeist just wasn't there. There wasn't an understanding that renters as a class should be pushing for better or that we deserve more and that there's a crisis that needs addressing. And yet now I feel as though that has changed, and it absolutely is something that media will be putting to politicians. They're having to defend their position against a growing class of people who are fucking angry and stressed and know that they deserve better than the shit that they're being served up. And that in itself is pretty incredible. And I think that we've already shifted the discussion on things like pets and no grounds evictions, and rent caps is the next frontier, and we're clearly making ground on it.
It is crazy. Again, a third of Australians are renting. It's like 2.2 million landlords, or rather people with property investments. Okay. So it's sort of like 1 in 5 households, might have an investment property, but a third of people are renting. But of course, surprise, surprise, the people in the political class and everyone in the media, pretty much, chances are they've got some kind of investment or interest in the Australian property market. And so, they love to see things from the landlord's point of view.
Yeah. And I think that traditionally, it has been harder to argue for renters' rights because there was more of an idea of aspiration towards landlordism. More people thought that they might be able to get into the property market. And with that being more of a fading dream for so many people, they are less likely to be like, oh, well, that could affect me one day. And they recognize that it actually only affects a smaller proportion of the population.
Yeah. And it's so much more sort of tangible or achievable, right? Like, I'm actually, I've been working on the housing chapter for my book this week, and it's extremely depressing just how cooked the Australian housing market and the political economic circumstances of it. But you get to a point like where you go, okay, a whole bunch of people are not going to be able to afford their home the way things are going, but they are going to be renting for either a very long period of time or potentially their entire life. So, okay, if I'm going to be a renter, then absolutely renting should be way less shit than it already is. Like that should actually be a priority of a political fight, because it is really much more achievable perhaps than upsetting the entire $1 trillion residential housing market that we have to deal with.
Yeah. And especially this is the thing when we get the argument from landlords, from the property industry, from conservatives that renters should be grateful for landlords because they are providing a service, they're providing housing. It's not like other investments where it's just for them. This is about actually, doing something that needs to be done. And so if it is genuinely, which obviously it's not, like we have a profit-driven private housing market that prioritizes that over the provision of a secure home for everyone. But if you want to provide a secure home to people via renting, then it absolutely makes sense that it would be regulated in such a way that their home is safe and secure and that they can afford to live there, and that you're not just profiteering wildly in a period of, intense during cost of living crisis.
Yeah. I'm a landlord because I just love providing housing to people, but I refuse to offer a 5-year lease for my property. I immediately turn it into an Airbnb as soon as I can if I can make more money immediately. I will happily leave my investment property empty as a speculative vacancy to wait for it just to increase in value, because that's actually a lot easier than dealing with the hassle of, putting people in the actual property like that. But I just love housing. I just love
I'm a philanthropist, really. Housing. Yeah.
Some people point, their immediate reaction was like, actually, Max, the federal government can't actually do that. I don't know if you have thought about this at all. Section C3, subsection, actually. Yeah. Which is always a good rule for life is just assume that people have thought about a thing they're talking about a little bit, just a little bit. I think that's a good piece of advice across the board.
Check what they've actually said first, maybe.
That's also great because it was all the Greens, there's no detail for the Greens plans, and then they won't even read the very basic website page that Max pointed to explain what they're thinking about.
Answers literally all of their questions.
It's all there. But yes, it is true that the federal government doesn't look after housing rental rights stuff. There was a constitutional referendum in the 1940s where the federal government tried to take control of prices and rent controls so they could potentially do something like this, and that was defeated. And you'll note all the renters' rights stuff is happening at the state level. And yes, Max totally thought about this. The Greens have talked about this. What they're saying is that National Cabinet should coordinate the nationwide freeze with each state and territory to implement it via their respective rental tenancy acts. The federal government regularly plays a coordinating role on issues like industrial relations or energy. So all that's, normally that's up to individual states, but the federal government does play a role. And the Commonwealth could also make future housing funding conditional on states and territories introducing a rent freeze and rent control. So they could sort of say, well, if you want more money for, there are ways for this to be done at the federal level to work with the states to make it happen.
Yeah, it's basically the National Cabinet would set national standards that are then to be implemented in legislation at a state and territory level. Pretty simple.
Pretty simple. Well, our Prime Minister and landlord, Anthony Albanese, doesn't think so. He was asked about this at a press conference, and he said,
"It's not clear to me, short of nationalising property, how that could be achieved."
To which the Green Left Twitter said, "Ding, ding, ding." Let's just do that, Welcome again to the resistance, comrade. That sounds good.
Okay, first of all, nationalised property. Second of all, this man is the Prime Minister of Australia. I think he should know how legislation and governance works.
Yeah.
Fucking hell. And maybe have, read the policies of the other parties as well, if we really wanted to go even one step further in level of competency. But sure, no, he doesn't understand it.
I mean, again, I haven't watched the press conference. I assume the journalists didn't do that follow-up either. Journalists just doing the reading and predicting what government figure might say, and then also having some follow-up that might explain that. And so really you want to nail down, do you object to this in principle, or do you object to it because you don't think it can happen? Okay,
yeah,
and if we deal with the issue of it can't happen, do you actually have a problem with the idea of, rent controls, or in this case, a rent freeze for a short period of time?
Yes, that's such a good point. I would hope that, it's so true. I mean, and part of it presumably is that there are limited opportunities to ask questions. There's a limited amount of time at a press conference. You just have your one question and then you're done. But perhaps rather than wasting it with the government then just going, oh, here's a bullshit reason, that journalists should then go, actually, here's the facts. What is your view? What is your position on this as the fucking government?
Yep.
Yeah.
And you should, and people are like, oh, journalists shouldn't advocate for a policy. I was like, well, you should pursue the logic of the argument to get their response. It doesn't mean that you necessarily believe or endorsing what the Greens are saying necessarily.
You could correct
here is the best version of the argument. What is your response? Yeah.
Correct their factual error, maybe, to get, like, that is your job as a journalist.
Yes.
Anyway.
Treasurer Jim Chalmers, who to his credit is not a landlord. I looked it up. He does not have investment properties, which is very interesting, which seems like terrible treasuring. I mean, it's like, come on, mate. You're leaving money on the table. He said the rent freeze is not something that we've been working on, before adding that we do accept that a big part of the inflation problem in our economy is skyrocketing rents. Mr. Chalmers said the government was working to address issues around housing supply, which has been exacerbating problems in the rental market. There's a national housing shortage as well. That's why we've set up our little fund, blah, 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 blah. It's why I'm working with the superannuation industry in the States to see if we can build more stock, because at the end of the day, what we're seeing in the rental market, which is so difficult for people to deal with, is a reflection of an absence of rental stock. We're going to start dealing with that. Emerald, why is that not true?
The main thing to point out is that when governments and developers in the real estate industry immediately go to supply as the cause of the housing crisis, there's a reason for that. And that's not to say that we shouldn't be building more homes and increasing supply of housing. We absolutely should. And that's why the Greens have a policy to build 1 million social and affordable public homes. But these people only want to talk about supply because they don't want to talk about any of the other factors, because they want to distract from the fact that we have a housing and a taxation system that privileges landlords and profit-seeking over the provision of a home as a right, and all of the other policies that should be put in place to fix that. Instead, they want something that will actually benefit them. They want to be able to build and invest in more homes that will make them more money on the private market. And so that's why they talk about supply. Like what Jim Chalmers is doing here, he's talking about social housing, and but I think that he's talking about that because he knows that won't upset property investors, because by only talking about supply, we're not threatening their business model.
Yeah, again, researching this book, it's like all comes down to demand and supply, but no one wants to talk about the fact that property investors are the worst of both worlds. They both increase the demand for housing because they want to buy fuckloads of houses, even though they don't live in them, and they restrict the supply by buying up houses that other people can't buy, right? So it's like it's the worst of both worlds. From the point of view of people who just want a house that they can own and live in, property investors are fucking over in both ways. And also, they are increasing the supply of rental properties at the cost, of course, of reducing the supply of houses to be bought that people could buy and live in.
And they'll often leave their fucking properties empty.
Right, totally. Yeah. Some other reactions. We had Campbell Newman get telling
good.
Max.
Oh, that's right. I saw this response. It's good. Keep going.
Perhaps Max Chandler-Mather, you could start by calling for a 2-year freeze on above CPI council rate increases, above CPI increases in state government imposts, above CPI increases for insurance and higher interest rates before you resort to your politics of class warfare.
And Max said, what did he say? Love to be accused of class warfare by the man who sacked thousands and thousands of public servants or something like that, which I just thought was fantastic.
Beautiful riposte.
Yeah.
This is good. It was a talking point that you heard a lot. It's like, hey, well, landlords' costs are going up. Are you going to freeze all the shit? And you go, well, again, rents are being hiked by triple inflation.
Yes.
Okay, so it's not. So if everything is sticking to CPI, then we're totally fine with that. But that's clearly not what's happening. Clearly, landlords in this very tight rental market, in which there are really low vacancy rates, are taking advantage of that, jacking up rents like crazy, and making some sweet profits.
Yeah, it's also the case that, and there's been coverage of this, of the fact that even where house prices are falling, rents continue to go up. Because landlords are effectively using this. They use their asset that they have complete free rein to charge as much as they want for, to recoup the costs of living in every other aspect of their life. And where that does apply to smaller scale investors, maybe just, ordinary people who have one investment property perhaps, and they are struggling with the rest of their life, the answer is not allow them to hand that, to palm that cost off to someone who's worse off, to a renter, who very likely has much less money than them. The answer is like, well, we should do something about fucking wages because, if the people who are genuinely doing it tough need to charge their tenant more to be able to get by, then that's not the fucking tenant's fault. The tenant shouldn't have to pay for that.
Yeah. And also, I'm sorry, keep in mind, if you're making a loss on your rental property, guess what you get to do? You get to use that to minimize your taxable income through negative gearing. So even for landlords who are running at a loss, which is the majority of landlords, by the way, again, you're using it to cut down your tax bill. So chances are you're probably going to be okay.
Yeah.
But then what if the landlords get out of the market, Emerald? And this is actually really scary. And this is actually like Max hasn't thought about this. He wants to help renters, but he could actually be making things worse.
He really hasn't thought this through.
Economist for the Grattan Institute, Brendan Coates, said the idea isn't necessarily the best solution to unaffordable renting. Rent control has a seductive, intuitive appeal, which is that if you basically cap rent increases, then you're going to protect renters.
Sorry to interrupt you, but it's like, again, how many times do we have to say people are like, it sounds good, I don't trust it. It makes sense. It can't be good. I know it makes complete fucking sense, but that's why it's bad. Anyway, go on.
But it also potentially has some big costs in the long run, which is that if you do have rent control in place, then you're limiting the ability of the market to tell investors, developers, everyone else that we need more housing. The landlords, they will just sell all their properties. It's not going to be good for them anymore. They'll sell all their properties and they'll get out.
But that's a different, like that argument though, this argument that it's like we need the market to let us know when we need more properties. It's like, no, we can just look at how many people there are and how many people need a home. Like it's literally that, because if we genuinely had a system that was predicated on the idea that everyone deserves a home, then we would simply base the provision of housing on how many people there are, how many households there are versus how many homes. Like,
which we have more of. There are more houses in this fucking country than households. There's about 1 million empty ones out there.
Yeah, but what you're actually talking about is we need the market to figure out how much money people can make, because you can't get out of that frame of mind that housing is about making fucking money. So there's that argument. And then there's the argument that people are like, well, if it's too hard, people will exit the property market, and so there will be fewer landlords to provide housing, quote unquote, to people who need it. And it's like, sure, get the fuck out of the market then so that someone else can have the home. Because like there are people who want to buy a house but they can't afford to because other people are hoarding them for the purpose of profiteering through landlordism. Let them buy the homes, or allow stop leaving the provision of housing up to the private market, who have royally fucked it because all they care about is making money, because that's the purpose of the market. And reinvest in social housing, make the state the primary provider of housing, so that it is about giving people a home, not to be too crazy or communist like socialist.
You goddamn hippie. I mean, it's important to underline just how bad this is, and how the idea of renting is presented as a personal choice, as like something that people like to do. People like say, I love renting. I just love paying off somebody else's mortgage in order to have shelter, which is a basic human need.
I like to live on the edge. I like to not know if I'll have a home in 6 months. Ooh.
It's pretty cool. In a 2014 survey, the New South Wales Tenants Union found that 57% of renters say they rent because they can't afford to buy. Okay, so 50 and 10% said they were looking to buy. They were, thinking about buying pretty soon. So, sure, there are some people who need to rent, or rent fits into their lifestyle. And I think, in the near future, renting market is obviously going to exist and be part of life in society. But you've got this huge and growing number of people who are only renting because they cannot afford to get, to buy their own place.
And you're right that ownership shouldn't be, that's an important thing to note, is that home ownership shouldn't be the only objective, and is actually pretty counterintuitive for any kind of radical left, housing justice movement should be looking at a mix of housing, not just focusing on ownership.
Yeah, totally. Which again, in Europe, it's like people have 10-year, don't own the place they live in. They have 10-year leases, and they just leave it a long term in a property, and they make it their home, and they have lots and lots of rights. But home ownership and property speculation and investment is just not so baked into every single facet of economic life, unlike it is here in our insane financialized housing system in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
Quickly, we should touch on, yes, Max did go on the project and it was very funny. Hamish McDonald did ask him.
This does sound vaguely like socialism, possibly even communism.
Possibly.
This sounds vaguely like socialism, which is, again, just rent controls, the most basic. It's basically like it's social democratic basic regulation of the market by the state. So that's weird. Steve Price went off king. He said the proposal was mad and he was going to crash the housing market. And this was great. He said,
we've got a rental system that works. A lot of great landlords there's even landlords who during COVID made the rent cheaper for people because they wanted to look after good tenants. You're trying to blow up a system that actually works.
It is, I have to say, it's pretty tone deaf. Like, I shouldn't be surprised at what conservative idiots get on the TV and say. But I think if you're trying to not look like a fucking idiot, maybe don't get on TV in 2022 and like say that the housing system is fine and good. Like,
it's
surely
good.
We all accept that that's not, you need to explain why it's not your fault that the housing system is fucked, but don't pretend that it's working.
Well, Max, to his credit, said,
I think you just need to talk to the 2.7 million renters who are in severe rental stress at the moment and ask them if the housing market is working.
Even if you acknowledge, you'll get the property lobby saying, well, it's, there's two sides to this story, okay? And some tenants aren't actually that good. And that's how it's always presented. Like, we need to balance the interest between landlords and tenants, which, again, is obviously bullshit because tenants have fuck all power.
Yeah.
Landlords are kings. They're lords. They're literally lords.
They're literally lords, Tom. That's how it works.
And perhaps this was best illustrated by an incredible clip that Max tweeted out. This is from Ben Fordham's call-in show. This blew my mind. I've struggled to think that this is real, but this is genuinely a caller who called into Ben Fordham's show to talk about the Greens rental freeze policy. He was very annoyed. He was explaining that, he doesn't get much returns on his rental properties. He doesn't have a super system, so this is like his income. This is how it works, and he just doesn't think it's going to work. And Ben Fordham asked him, how many investment properties do you own? Just so we get an idea of the lay of the land here.
We should put the clip in. Can we put the clip in? Because
Please. Yeah. Roll that tape.
Can I ask you out of interest how many you've got, David? How many rental properties do you own?
Well, 283.
283 rental properties?
Yeah.
I love the pause.
There's something so beautiful about, I feel like we're listening to this man get radicalized on air as he's like 283. 283.
283 rental properties?
Yeah.
What?
I've worked hard for that.
But this guy, David is his name or whatever. He says 283 rental properties. He says, I worked hard for that. I mean, how melted does your brain need to be that you think you worked hard enough to own 283 properties? And
and he's like, you start to wonder if maybe there should be some sort of limit on this stuff. You start to think maybe someone should regulate this. It seems like maybe.
I wonder whether at some point we need to be realistic, though, about how many homes people need to own. But that's a lot of homes for one person to own. 283. And that's the system we've got in place. But you wonder whether that is really in the interests of everyone in Australia struggling to get into a home. 283.
This is getting kind of out of hand.
This is a little bit bogus.
It's just, and it just goes to show that, this clip is hilarious because for so many reasons, because it's so funny that this guy would just call up and be like, I just have a little problem with this because I have 300 investment properties. It's funny because of Ben Ford's reaction. It's very funny in that regard, but it points to the reality behind this fucking, debate over tenants' rights and housing, where it is often presented as the average mum and dad investor versus tenants forgetting that the only people who really are going to be significantly like interested in and lobbying against renters' rights are these massive investors who have hoarded huge numbers of fucking homes and fucked over the fucking housing market, and who will pretend still that they're just an ordinary person who's concerned, who wants to call up to the radio and just, you know, concerned because they've worked hard for something. But they are the ones who are making enormous profits from this. And fuck, I don't know if you have the statistics about like the proportion of landlords who actually make the proportion of profits from the housing market, but it's incredibly concentrated in that small group of people like Mr. Dave.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the overwhelming benefit of the capital gains discount and negative gearing overwhelmingly flows to like the top 10% of income earners across the board. Property investors across the board come from the top 40% of income earners. And, you know, look, the vast majority of people who have an investment property just have one. It's about 70%. That's about 1.5 million people. Okay. And I think that's actually an interesting calculation, which probably fed into the Greens' revised approach to negative gearing. Okay. So if you've got one investment property, that's okay. But then more than that is when you lose negative gearing concessions, which is probably pretty decent. Like 20% of all property investors have two. And then it gets smaller and smaller as you go up. So 1% of property investors have 5 investment properties. Less than 1% have 6 or more investment properties. So that's about 20,000 people. But of course, if 20,000 people have, 283 investment properties, that's just like a fuckload of houses that are tied up with this tiny 1%. And, you know, we hear about all the time. There are property bros out there who are bragging about the fact they have 200 properties, or I own 30 properties by the time I'm 30. You know, they are building these massive portfolios. Their job is to own houses and to exploit other people's need for shelter to make sweet cash. That is a sick society, and that has to end. Yes. Yeah. TLDR, the Greens are good. Do the Greens thing, Anthony Albanese, please. Nationalise all property and fight for renters' rights, please.
283.
Straight down Flinders Street to the Westgate Freeway, bringing traffic to a standstill. Some protesters put their lives in danger. Others treated it as a block party.
Alrighty, everyone. We have our first ever return guest who is not a greeny green. It's Tom Tanuki. He's a writer, satirist, activist, and recently unmasked as the face of evil. Thanks for joining us again, Tom.
Thank you. Yes, I am. Also, lots of other names. State agent I've got here. I actually took down all the things I've been being called lately. Yeah. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm really good.
Wow.
Thank you. We're not getting into that yet. I'm really good. Thanks for having me back on. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I love what you guys do. I love this whole thing. I love Serious Danger, so it's really cool.
Oh, we love you too.
Tom. I think we have to clarify. Why are you the face of evil? Should we clarify this?
Well, we're getting to it.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll get to it, Tom.
Just don't bury the lead, you know? It's a real hook.
Yeah, I've been called names like that. At the moment, I've been called names like that because I have captured the attention of a subsection of like Australian conspiracists, really, you know, which is my sort of wheelhouse is talking about various fringe political and conspiracist scenes, you know, I suppose. And one subsection of those are people that I describe as like pedophile fantasists, as in they, you know, the sort of the pedophile power conspiracies, you know, they're obsessed with them, you know, and they make them up to level their scores or, you know, settle scores with people who they don't agree with. They call everyone that they don't like a pedophile. They're obsessed with satanic ritual abuse and that kind of thing. And I've caught their attention, you know, because I talked about well, look, they've progressed. They've gone in a certain direction, and really something I did a video a couple of weeks ago talking about an actual child abduction aided by Australian sovereign citizens that occurred, you know, which is just I mean, it's horrendous. It's a good news story, so I'm happy, we're okay to talk about it because thank God the girl was found.
She was also found, Tom, before you were like, why the fuck is that a good news story?
No, that's not. No, the abduction is not good news, just to clarify. The finding part is what I think is good news. The finding at the other end of it.
The abductors didn't think that was...
Yeah.
They didn't think it was good news, did they? I remember and we'll get into this, but I think, I saw a screenshot of people being like, they found Grace, they found Grace, angry face, angry swearing face.
Oh, they were
very angry about this. But yeah, we wanted to get you on the show again, kind of as like our cookers correspondent, just to check in on, what the crazies are up to, because we've got that child abduction. There's the little gathering, some sort of party of the freedom anti-vax folks, I understand, has happened this week.
Yeah.
Then there's Avi Yemini being stopped at the New Zealand border. There's so much to talk about.
There's lots of things to talk
we wanted
about.
you to explain things to us.
Yeah, I'm very happy to come on here and give you a cooker update.
Fantastic. Well, I think we should start with this child abduction since we kind of started getting into it. Can you give us the shortest possible version? What the fuck?
Sorry, you have to
happened?
Forgive me. I'm just grabbing my cat for.
Oh, hello, cat.
People, by the way, this is Chimpy. He's going to be meowing and interrupting the interview the entire
also,
way.
secretary to the face of evil.
Yeah, that's right. He's the secretary. Yeah, that's right. Vice president of evil. So, okay. So I'll hold my cat and talk to you about child abductions. The thing is it was a 5-year-old little girl named Grace was disappeared from a supervised visitation about 2 weeks ago now. And it became pretty clear within a couple of days of that the mother had disappeared with the child, and that the mother was, as of a few months prior, sort of had really settled in with a group of sovereign citizen conspiracists from up that way, some of whom I've already really covered before for their role in, like, you might remember the old Parliament House fire in Canberra when there were a lot of sovereign citizens and that kind of subsection, which I've tried to discuss before on my channel, of Indigenous sovereign citizens, as in people, conspiracists who've sort of invaded the Indigenous space and sort of warped some genuine notions of Indigenous sovereignty with a SovCit style pseudo-legal sovereignty, which doesn't help Indigenous people. It doesn't help anyone, does it? It's just delusional power fantasies. It's what sovereign citizens are kind of all about. Some of the more notable figures among those people had become friends with the mum, who, and I'd found her Facebook channel, and she'd really become deep into those conspiracies regarding satanic ritual abuse, which, obviously had their heyday during the satanic panic of the 70s and 80s. She'd got really into that. And that's quite a popular conspiracy that spread around, had a bit of a rejuvenation with people through the lockdowns and with the sort of the QAnon lot as well. Like they're constantly.
It's very QAnon.
Yeah. They're constantly imagining. Yeah. That's right. And I will say, as background, actually, speaking of QAnon, in America, we've already seen a spate of QAnon-aided child abductions that had been occurring since 2020, like a series of times. We hadn't really seen it here yet, though, But anyway, I digress.
The irony there, of course, is the whole thing is about protecting children from evil pedophiles who run the entire state and Hollywood. And, of course, it's all about the kiddies. And then, ironically, if you go down that rabbit hole so far, you find yourself abducting children and kidnapping them and holding them against their
will.
Will.
Rescue them,
To rescue them from the bad people that are out there.
Yeah, and an illegal abduction of a child is the textbook definition of child trafficking, which is, precisely what these people are constantly talking about. It is, But this obsession with inventing new cabals of, I say this to these sorts of people when they come into my comments or what have you all the time. They're really, because they'll name things like Jeffrey Epstein or, the many instances of real pedophile rings or what have you that have existed in the past. Yeah, I'm not sitting here denying the existence of real pedophiles or pedophile rings. What I'm saying is we probably got enough without you making up more. You know? Well, you know, I think I'm angry about the real ones. They're enough for me. That's my cup's full with the real ones. So about a month ago, anyway, this mum talked to one of these guys, a SovCit figure called Dale Holmes. And she had a lengthy interview with him. She was off camera, but she spent a long time talking about a lot of what seemed to amount to like paranoid delusions. You know, she's thought that there's people who've been planted in her life since her daughter was a baby to deliberately to try and take her child away from her, like agents of the state. And she thought she was the target of a multi-generational military conspiracy to abuse her family from her grandmother through to her daughter. You know, these are things that you're listening to and you're like, okay, well, Mum clearly has concerns, but a lot of these concerns are coming from conspiracies, you know. And mate, I'm not a doctor, I don't know her, but, you know, it sounded like she was having paranoid delusions, you know. It really did sound like that. But, of course, Dale Holmes is encouraging it because Dale is a pedophile fantasist par excellence. So his whole thing is about finding stories that are new pedophile ring evidence. And he's kind of even watching this lengthy interview, he's kind of coaching it. He's giving her the words because he knows all the examples, real and fake, of pedophile rings, you know, the satanic ones that he thinks he knows about. And he's giving her the rhetoric. He's going, sounds like what your child's been subjected to is an organised pedophile ring. Yeah? And she's going, yeah. And it's like, you could just say.
Yeah, okay, I guess. Yeah, that sounds,
So that was the conversation. And I might never have seen that, but for the fact that a few weeks after that, the child in question went missing from a supervised visitation because ever since Mum said that the daughter was making disclosures about abuse, and then obviously they went through the sexual assault, you know, support centre and what have you, but as soon as they talked to the daughter, Mum was basically the state filed a protection order against the mum, and it was just supervised visits. Clearly, I don't know part of this, but clearly they were concerned that the mum was coaching the children in this stuff, you know, in these sort of satanic abuse conspiracies and what have you, you know. So she'd only had supervised visitations, and after a few months of hanging out with all these conspiracists, she took her child. And then it was only a couple of days after that, you know, NT police put something out saying the 5-year-old girl missing. And then one of these conspiracists, there's a couple called Craig Oldroyd and Juliet Oldroyd. And they are, they've been around. Craig Oldroyd is, again, another sovereign citizen. You know, he thinks he's an independent sovereign being and all that kind of, all the SovCit stuff. And he was already known for having organised about 100 or more conspiracists to file orders with the NT police the new NT government to try and stall their pandemic powers. You know, so they're conspiracists and they're very much anti-lockdown figures. That's what brought them all together. They admitted on Facebook that they had helped to, in their own words, abduct the child. And then when we realised that, when we were like, oh, fuck, you know, we're getting it like they got it in America now. We're getting an organised child abduction ring of Australian sovereign citizens who themselves believe that they are, you know, fighting against child traffickers. But what are they doing? They're trafficking a child.
Why would they post that on Facebook? Why would they be like, that feeling when
we
you abducted
the child? Yeah.
Amazing. Why would they do that? Well, they definitely
I know they're not the most
believe-
rational people in the world, but surely they know I did a crime on the internet is not going to work out well.
Yeah. Well, she literally wrote, I abducted the child and her mother. So then it was around that time she got. You know, the police started raiding people's houses in that area looking for this child. And they raided Juliet and Craig Oldroyd's house twice. And then the second time they actually took Juliet Oldroyd, presumably because she'd admitted that she'd abducted the child. She'd literally written it. And they took her and they put her in the watch house. They raided the house of another guy called David Cole or Lernpa. he's a pretty notorious sort of Indigenous sovereign citizen figure. A lot of people came to know him a little bit because he was getting into it with Briggs, as in rapper Briggs last year, calling Briggs a corporate black, and like Briggs was sharing memes of himself looking like Vince McMahon coming out from the WWE, like I'm a corporate black with his face over Vince McMahon. Anyway. David Cole's unhinged. He really, really is, and he's a big name amongst the conspiracist lot. And he was talking about it too. He clearly knew what was going on behind the scenes. At one point, I remember there was a conversation. He did a live, and he goes, "And the child's safe." The child was probably safe. We're probably, So they raided his house, and they raided Dale Holmes, who I'd said earlier had done that big week-long interview, and they had this rule, like, did these lives afterwards, of course, because these are people who just do Facebook lives every day of their life, and they say everything, and they all seemed like a bit put out by the fact that the police had raided them, like they were just generally irritated by it and inconvenienced, because like, just leave me alone.
I'm just trying to do my job, rescuing and abducting the children, and these police are wasting my time trying to find them.
Yeah. So
they should be going after people who are trying to harm children. Not me. I'm saving kids, but these they should be going get the real criminals.
Exactly. Now here's the added dimension with, I suppose, in the Australian context, the SovCit thing is that all these people believe that they have genuinely announced their separation. That they have been annexed themselves from corporate, as they call it, or Australian law, that they're genuine sovereign beings, that they're kind of like mini nation states or diplomats all themselves. Yeah, so
they've called Barleys on all Australian laws.
Yeah, I no longer wish to be a part of this narrative, of which I never asked to be a part.
It's a real control complex. So if you've really done that, then why do you give a fuck what the police or the law are doing? They're raiding you. They're like another state. You know what I mean? This is almost like another nation declaring war on you. You are
right.
So they go into the police station and they loudly declare, like the partner of Juliet, who was, as I said in the watch chest, Greg, he's going into the coppers and he's going, "I'm a diplomat. I need to see Juliet Oldroyd right now. You need to show her to me, or you will be going up again. I am invoking international humanitarian law. I am a human rights ambassador."
I mean, to be fair, don't they realise the Australian government doesn't give a shit about international human rights law, even if it was real and they were a sovereign state?
Well, but these people are going to, I know. Well, that's, exactly. They're not exactly very good with children in custody as it is. You're right. So, but these people are, human rights ambassadors. They're independent sovereign beings. They're the best placed people to call these people to account, So, as I said to you sort of, earlier, like I make stories or narratives out of this stuff, and it's because I do that because I recognise it can be a little bit hard to find all the little Facebook lives and all this kind of thing. I work with those researchers I mentioned before, and I do that because I think, sometimes when it's really important, it's good to tell stories out of these things so that bigger people than me, with more influence and power and understanding and capacity to do something than me. Yeah. So I thought, okay, the child's missing. I don't know if anyone's going to realise that this is a coordinated sovereign citizen child abduction ring unless I show them all the videos and I tell it in order. So as much as it makes me deeply uncomfortable to make a fucking YouTube video
about a missing child,
YouTuber though I may be, that may be my profession, as much as it makes me uncomfortable to do a video about this subject, I think it's probably important that I do it. So I did. I told the story about it as carefully as I could, just because I know that journos look at my stuff. I know that people, people with, as I said, more power than me look at myself. So I thought, I'll make this up. And you know what? Maybe someone tied to this child abduction ring might see what I've put together and they might see it within themselves to give someone else some information or return the child faster. Because, as far as we could see, the child was probably in some sort of a danger. That was the concern, obviously. So a few days after that, the child did get returned. It was either by the mother, interestingly, or someone else tied up with this ring went into NT police station, some police station in Darwin, and returned Grace. So, this is good. That part of the story ends well, amazingly. What a relief, you know. And I think that was last Friday. But then, as of about last Saturday, Sunday, for me, you know, I started getting the attention of some of the people that I've just discussed in this little failed child abduction ring. And I've already recorded subject matter. You know, I told you before, I call them pedophile fantasists. Well, you know, because I put together a video because I don't think I'd ever seen really much on this subject. Called pedophile fantasists. I did it. It was maybe much earlier in the year, I think, because we've got some of the world's most influential conspiracist figures here. We've got a woman called Fiona Barnett, who's like infamous worldwide among people who are obsessed, you know, nowadays with satanic ritual abuse cults. She's accused half of our ex-prime ministers, you know, this lurid list of every famous celebrity and politician name under the sun. She's accused them all. She's really famous. She's actually, some of her stories are actually really quite pivotal to QAnon stuff, you know. So we're really pulling our weight in a way that I'm not sure that lots of people know, you know.
She's like the Kate Blanchett of like worldwide pedophile conspiracy theories.
You're right. We actually should be really proud of ourselves.
It's our Fiona.
Our Fiona. Yeah. Hold your head high, Australia. So Dale Holmes. Okay, so Dale Holmes did this 25-minute video talking about me and my pedophile fantasist video, and he'd obviously seen all that due to my video about the child abduction ring, and just. It's actually a really incredible video. I think what I might do next week is take the time to respond to it in excruciating detail. So it's going to be like
very
this.
meta.
Yeah, this is the world of doing online videos. My video about your video about my video, all this garbage, you know. But I do think that a lot of these people only work via video. They only consume, you know, that's all they look at.
True.
They don't really read much, and I think it's useful sometimes for engaging with some of them. I've had messages from people, you know, they're rare. They're far too rare far rarer than I hope they would be. But I've had messages from people saying, I really believed all this satanic pedophile stuff and that every ex-standing prime minister was a pedo and, you know, all these kinds of things. I really believed that. And then I saw some of your stuff taken in apart and I realised that I was silly, you know. Thank you. and they're amazing. They're amazing things
what more
to get,
can you want?
know.
Yeah.
They're actually really cool messages to get. You're like, okay, this is kind of worth it, you know, for things like that. You can feel like you can pull people out of it, you know. I did this very long video basically explaining every single standing satanic pedophile conspiracy in the world, and it just led to all this stuff, you know. What have I got? I've got Tom Tanuki, state agent. These are some of the comments on Telegram in response to this video, by the way.
Yeah.
Sure.
Part of cover-up damage control has been hired to troll and discredit people who expose pedophiles. What else have we got?
How much are you getting
As
paid?
far as I'm concerned, everyone who goes out of their way to degrade people speaking out about the children is a shadow pedo.
Oh, shadow pedo.
Shadow pedo.
Peeping Tom, that's clever.
Yeah,
That's your
that
name.
Peeping Tom guy speaks volumes of creepy. So what does he have hidden in his closet?
Ooh.
Makes you think, doesn't it?
It does.
Make
I'm
you think.
thinking. Yeah.
Here's another good one. I think if you explored his head, you would not find much more than the concepts he has been given to peddle. I doubt he is university educated, but the people he collaborates with in secret are. So I'm the attack dog.
They're confused because they're like, I want to say that you're stupid, but I also have this like deeply anti-intellectual, anti-elite thing that I need to convey. So you're dumb and haven't been to university, but also the elites that you are friends with have, and both are bad.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the problem with me for them is that everyone who's against them has to be a member of the establishment. But I have fuck all subscribers.
You're just a guy.
I'm not actually very popular. So like,
very asset poor. Yeah.
They're going, what? If he's with the establishment, why doesn't he have much influence? You can see them like wrestling with this conundrum in the comments.
Very confusing.
It's a pretty great, like, accusation, isn't it? Just like calling someone a pedophile. It's like because as soon as you say like, no, I'm not a pedophile, then you immediately start sounding very dodgy. Very dodgy. If you're spending time defending yourself, saying I am not and never have been a pedophile, people start asking questions. You know what I mean?
Yeah, constantly, exactly. Yeah. Well, you know, my whole thing about talking about the subject of pedophile fantasies was that I noticed one of the big traits of these people is to, do the whole everyone I don't like is pedophile thing.
Yeah.
And so it's fitting that when they finally, a little bit too late, they saw this video I'd done months ago recently, and they're all going, oh, it's because he's a pedophile. It's like, well, this is what I'm saying about you. I'm telling you that you are this because you call everyone
you're doing the thing. You're doing the thing.
The only adequate response is, I know you are. You said you are, but what am I?
What am I?
And just do that ad nauseum, and I think that you'll be fine.
Okay, Tom, I'll just hop into the Telegram comments and just start saying that.
Yeah,
I know you are. Sit here.
I think that's a
You're
good
an
idea.
agent of the deep state. No, you are. That's you. That's what you are.
So this is it's actually you. Yeah. So I think I will respond to these people. I don't think these people are used to having someone respond to them, but I think even if it only works a little bit with a couple of people, it does plant a seed of doubt in some of their minds. And that's kind of what I do. So that's our pedophile ring update.
Yeah, I mean it's funny. Like, thank you, Tom. Yes, claps.
Yes,
because you're right that this got hardly any coverage, and I think flew under the radar for a lot of people because there is so much to wrap your head around before you can even get to the point of beginning to understand this. Like, I think, and potentially, a lot of people listening to this might be like, wait, SovCit, what's that again? So you have to know what the sovereign citizens believe, how that then connects to what's Pizzagate, what's QAnon, why are these now suddenly connected?
Yeah.
Why are they also connected to anti-vax movements and to the, pandemic COVID conspiracy stuff, and it all melds together in these weird ways, because a lot of the time people who are getting into one of these conspiracy theories are very liable to getting into all of them because it's a certain way that they're thinking, or it's a distrust that they have of institutions.
Yep.
And they might be very isolated. They might be having a hard time. They might also, they may have mental health issues. So it's all very complicated. And I think just drawing it out in terms of what the fuck has actually happened in the real world can be helpful.
Yes, because does it actually have real world consequences? Kids being adopted.
Yeah, the child.
At the other end of all this weird and wacky stuff, things really do happen. But I will say to people that if they really want to do dives into this subject matter, I've done a 2-part, I suppose I'd call it a documentary on Australian sovereign citizens. It took me a long time. It's 2 hours all up, which is a long time, I know, but people tell me it doesn't take that long. It's a good view. And apparently.
It feels like 1 hour.
I get guilty when I do videos longer than a certain amount of time, but I harvested from decades worth of stuff, because some of these people were the first video wielding camera guys of all time. You know what I mean? They pioneered the art, So I harvested from all that. I've done 2-part stuff about sovereign citizens on my YouTube channel. I've looked at Australian QAnon stuff back when it was more of a thing, a couple of years ago. So I totally agree. It's very hard to understand. But if you've got the time and the will, then you can hop on my channel and look at some of these subject matters.
Now, I know we've got these other couple of stories I want to get to, and we'll move through them quickly. My really quick question for you, Tom, is I'm interested in the wake of the federal election, when we had a whole bunch of anti-vaxxy and the kind of political electoral expression of these folks was pretty roundly defeated, apart from old mate Babbitt from Victoria was elected to the federal parliament. How is the movement feeling about electoral politics? We've got the Victorian state election coming up soon. Big, strong anti-vax movement, big anti-lockdown sentiment in some sections of the community, that is, and some people who sincerely think that this will result in the overthrow of the evil Daniel Andrews government.
Yeah.
How is all that playing out, I guess, in the wake of the federal election and the upcoming state election in Victoria?
Good question. I really viewed the election day as the end. And I did a whole hour talk for Melbourne Free University about this not long ago. So I'm very much in my head. I really viewed the election day is the death knell of the what I call the anti-lockdown movement or the freedom movement. These people are not that they're going away anywhere. the scraps of the movement are still around, and they really became like sort of lifestylist protesters. You know what I mean? Like now it became built into the fabric of their existence to at least weekly go out and rally, and the scraps of the movement still do, but they are the scraps. You have to remember, we saw around 100,000 people at one of these rallies in Melbourne last year. And Australia will never see, if Australia will ever see a conspiracist movement, far-right, adjacent, ambient conspiracist movement get 100,000 people. Again, I'd be stunned, The confluence of circumstances that led to that were amazing, but that's been and gone, So I'm not saying they don't get a few hundred, maybe even a couple thousand sometimes at rallies in Melbourne or what have you, but they're really the scraps of the movement. And so what's happening is, well, look, they're parts of the movement are still rallying every week. They occasionally come to everyone's attention when they do something like stand outside the hospital in Melbourne.
The children's hospital.
Abuse the children's hospital, no less. And actually, the funny thing is, after all this stuff about blockade Australia and greenies and this and that, and everyone, you blocked the ambulance. They literally blocked an ambulance. That never happens. Like that's always just like a thing that like Andrew Bolt types say, just to make you look bad for caring about something, But they literally did actually block an ambulance. They finally fulfilled this prophecy. This Ray Hadley style prophecy of blocking an ambo. And abusing people on their way in because, of course, someone taking their dying child into a hospital is your enemy. They do come to everyone's attention for doing that, But they're almost going through their greatest hits when they do that. Like on that same day, they went to the CFMEU headquarters. It was a very postmodern rally. It was like a rally to remember that there had been a rally there. Do you know what I mean? They were there going, we remember what happened.
Lest we forget.
Yeah. Just wanting to get some of those good old vibes back.
Like Anzac Day for cookers.
Yeah. They will. I suspect that some of them will, particularly on some of the big days, that they seem to already be remembering their anniversary, but maybe they might want to go on like an anniversary walk up the Westgate Bridge or something. An anniversary of when that happened. I think that would be nice,
Yeah.
So they're doing these rallies. They're still rallying all the time in Canberra. They're doing very odd stuff like they still rally outside the Governor-General's house. They do this thing where they go into parks and they like glad wrap around 3 or 4 trees repeatedly until there's enough space for them to write something on that's about exposing the pedophile cabal.
That's creative. I quite like that. I guess it's a bit wasteful.
It is wasteful, yeah. But it lets you, anything that lets you write something about pedophiles on it is, the whole world to these people is a blank timeline to put a Facebook post on. Do you know what I mean?
They're banned from all the platforms, like all the online platforms, so they've had to make their own analog social media platform, which is glad wrap around a tree to spread
which is
their
good.
nonsense.
It's like we all need to log off and do more political activism in the real world. So I think that's actually really
true.
So get out there, get off your computer, go abduct those children, go write stuff about pedophiles on public buildings.
Do something.
Show that you mean it.
Get out there.
It's very good.
Be the change that you want to see in the world. If you really want to see children being abducted, they're being the change, Tom.
Again, lots of people for the Greens could learn from that. Like, Twitter isn't real life, okay? So get out there and start door knocking about the pedophile cabals.
Please do not abduct children. To be clear, we are not
don't do that.
inciting anyone to commit crimes.
Yeah. Please don't. Stop. If you think that's a good idea, send me a DM, we'll chat. Don't do it. Yeah. Look, so they're doing things like that. And you're right. Well, some of us could learn from their action. Other people, you've got these kind of like entrepreneurial type figures. Remember the whole first wave I sort of noticed of anti-lockdown influencers were all they were all like ex-MLMers, multi-level marketing or motivational speakers or sort of one of these kinds of grifts or another. And so they brought that energy into the anti-lockdown movement. So they really, really saw the anti-lockdown movement as being like an entrepreneurial opportunity for them, you know. And now that the movement's in decline, they're just trying to seize onto whatever scraps of entrepreneurial opportunity still exist for them. So there's this one guy, he's one of my favourites. He's called Thanos Panagidis. He was the first big anti-lockdown influencer in Australia. He got everyone to smash their TVs to show the mainstream media that we're not gonna accept your lies anymore.
Like great vision.
Yeah, he's great. He's got good energy, Thanos. And now that the movement's in decline, he's been organising these things called Tribe, where everyone gets together. And they're a bit naff and sad, like it's just trying to get the energy back together from the good old days. People get the mic and he just gives them the mic, and in this sort of sad function hall where the halogen lights are too bright.
Right, it's a town hall meeting.
Yeah, it's sad. It's got sad vibes. And people talk on the mic about how, I just want to get my passion back. That's literally, I was watching one of these meetings and they were going, I just want to get my passion back. And what they mean is that they want to get back the feeling of when they were walking up the Westgate Bridge or pissing on the Shrine of Remembrance.
To be part of something. Well, this is, you know, as funny as all this shit is, we always come back to this basic idea, which is people are deeply alienated, fucked over by our political system and by capitalism.
Absolutely.
And even when they're marching for horrible cooked ideas and conspiracy theories and stuff that does not exist, they are at least part of something, connecting with their fellow human beings, with other members of the working class, and working towards a common goal that's never going to happen. There is still something so beautifully, tragically bittersweet about all that. I find it every time.
It is. It's really poignant. I think a lot of these sort of shit-talking conspiracist figures, they would have in a world with a stronger community, there would have been someone to tell them, "Oh, fuck up, mate." You know what I mean? But we're not a stronger community. We're a highly atomized group of people who are, you know, we're all in fucking rentals. We get shuttled about from town to town, so no communities exist in real life. Obviously, the pandemic multiplied that factor by manifold. And what do we do? What's our town square? It's fucking Coles and Woolworths, you know? And we go back home. We don't know anyone. The only time anyone gives a shit about us is when we're in a Telegram channel trading conspiracies. That's what a lot of these people felt like. And it gave them the only sense of direction, you know? And all that gets impacted, you know, or magnified by everyone's fundamental instability with work, you know? We're all casualised. It's fucked for people, you know? And people have no better community to tell them that the conspiracies aren't real, but that they care about them. That's what brings them together.
Yeah, very true. Look, I think that we may be out of time to chat about anything else.
Avi Yemini got fucked he tried to get into New Zealand and was rejected, and that's funny and good. Is that
a convicted spouse abuser.
It is.
And he told everyone that he couldn't get into New Zealand because they labelled him a conspiracy theorist, but then it looks like it was actually because he is a convicted abuser, which he doesn't like to talk about. Of course.
No. Course. It's his past convictions, and he really made a boo-boo there because he doesn't want to talk about his domestic abuse convictions.
He was desperate to exploit the moment of being silenced and being targeted for who he is. So he had to post about the fact that he couldn't get into the country. But, was just hoping, I guess, that no one looked into why that actually was.
He's obliged as part of his employment with Rebel News to constantly fundraise. That's how he does so well. That's his entire job.
Yeah, which you have some good videos on.
Yeah. I mean, you know, this is what I always tell these stories. Whenever Avi Yemini really fucks up, I tell it in a video. You know, I'm so sick of talking about I hate it. But again, like we talked about before, the reason that I do it is because if you know, your uncle over the pandemic just suddenly goes, "Oh, I've seen that journalist, Avi Yemini, got bloody arrested for telling the truth." If you get in early enough, and people do, they share my videos because a lot of people just look at videos, you know, and they look at the stuff and they go, "Oh, okay, he's a really horrible person," you know, and they can get out early. Once they're really in, it's too late, you know, and they think that everyone who ever disparages Avi Yemini is just a leftist liar. You know?
Early intervention is very important.
Early intervention, yeah. My videos can be helpful with that, I have found.
Well, we may leave our main episode chat there. We'll have a special Patreon bonus episode where we're going to talk to you, Tom, about bad comedy and just uncomedy, as you call it, things that are not funny at all on the internet. Because it's just
please.
That's the real pandemic. That's the real epidemic right now. Am I right, folks?
That's the real shadow pandemic. Yeah.
Just shadow pandemic. Yeah.
The real killer.
But before we jump over there, is there anything that you want to plug for our listeners? Any way that folks can support you and your work?
No, look, I mean, really, Tom Tanuki, check me out on YouTube. I do videos weekly. I'm also found talking rubbish on other platforms, but, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook and what have you. But, yeah, my mainstay these days is my commitment to at least do a video at least weekly, on matters of the political fringe. Matters of whatever, really. Sometimes I'll just pick other stuff and talk about it if it interests me. But my wheelhouse, I suppose, is political fringe, conspiracists, and things like that. That's stuff that I know about, so I make it my business. So if anyone's interested in that, whether it be the ongoing week video stuff I do or the occasional long form stuff about some of these wacky SovCits or pedophile fantasies, go on my channel. You'll find it all there.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks for coming on again.
Thanks, Tom. Cheers, mate.
Thanks so much.
Max, first you got rid of ties. Now you're getting rid of landlords. What's next on your hit list? For privacy's sake, please don't say golfers.
Leaf blowers would probably be high on my list.
I've got a great leaf blower. It's really noisy.
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
Ding, ding, ding. Call to action.
It's the call to action time, everyone. This week's action from me is another chance to come and see me. Every fucking time. Well, I just think this is a great thing I'm doing. Come along. This is a fundraiser for Ellen Sandell, the member for Melbourne. She's running for re-election in the upcoming Victorian state election on Thursday, September the 1st at 7 p.m. I am hosting trivia. It's going to be so good. It's at the Melbourne City Bowls Club. Come on down. A bit of a fundraiser as well. Ooh, 69 people are coming. Nice. If you want to turn that into 70, then get involved. Links in the show notes if you want to buy tickets and come along and raise some cash for Ellen, who's a great MP.
And if you don't like Tom, which I know a lot of our listeners don't, and they just listen to me, another thing that you can do this week is join and share the Greens campaign to protect the coast from Labor's deep sea drilling. So you might have seen in the news this week, federal Labor being federal Labor, they approved 10 new ocean sites. So they've opened up 46,000 square kilometres for offshore oil and gas exploration. Well, that's weird. I thought they cared about the climate change. I thought the climate wars were over. Don't worry. They also approved fucking carbon capture and storage facilities off the coast of WA and the Northern Territory. So everything's going to be fine, even though that technology is completely unproven, doesn't fucking work, and is just a way for the fossil fuel industry to continue its wrecking of the planet and claiming that everything's going to be fine. So it is up to the Greens, apparently, to say, can you not fucking do this? We'll put a link in the show notes. There's a campaign to fight back against new oil and gas, fight for Australia's coast. By signing this, let's be honest, you're really just going to be kind of kept up to date with the campaign. But I think by sharing it and spreading the word, this hasn't got a whole lot of coverage. So if you can post about the fact that Labor is doing this and it's absolutely cooked and we shouldn't let them get away with it, that would also be very good.
David Pocock was sort of going, hang on, wait, I thought that this was bad and the Labor should do good things for the climate. What happened? Which is good. If he's getting suspicious and antagonistic towards the Labor Party and seeing through this bullshit and then wants to come on our little Green Senate team, then I say that's a good thing.
Come over to my house, but also to the Greens. David Pocock.
And have sex with me. Rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening right now. Follow us on social media at Serious Danger AU. Like and subscribe on YouTube, please. Share us around, spread the word. Email us anytime. hello@seriousdangerpod.com. Coming up this week, there is a bonus Patreon app with Tom Tanuki. Sign up to become a patron and you'll be able to listen to that. We just recorded that before the show. That's good shit. Talking about satire and being funny.
And laughing at Tom. Not with him. Oh, Tom
Thank you, Emerald.
Wait, which Tom? Sorry. Very confusing. Very confusing. We had double Toms this week.
Bye, everyone.
All right, bye.
Serious danger to Australia.